So Oscar Peterson, in my opinion, is one of the greatest jazz pianists that has ever contributed to the canon of music that is jazz.
From what I heard, there was no mistakes made.
What I've always found interesting about Oscar's life and history is, I think he's very much from and of Montreal. I know a number of Montrealers really think of him as really key and really important to the city and its distinct identity.
Well, Oscar Peterson was born in 1925 here in Canada, in Montreal, and grew up in a very musical family, was one of 5 children, was the fourth of 5, and took up the trumpet and piano at a very young age. Had a father who was very musical as well, and drilled in a solid regimen of practice into his schedule, and took a shine to the trumpet and piano very early on. Caught tuberculosis as a young kid, and as a result wasn't able to play the trumpet. After that, was advised not to, and eventually moved his sight solely towards the piano, where he focused his energy.
So Oscar Peterson, in my opinion, is one of the greatest jazz pianists that has ever contributed to the canon of music that is jazz. His technique was astounding. He began as a classical pianist as a young child and really achieved a mastery in classical piano, and then quickly jumped into the genre of jazz, and he had a phenomenal technique. But beyond that, the thing that most closely speaks to me is his command of rhythm and his ability to almost play the piano in a drum-like manner, no matter what the tempo is, whether he's playing super slow or he's playing really fast or right in between. He is conveying such a strong sense of swing, and he is just making the music feel great. He's making you want to dance to it. Right? When you listen to an album like Night Train, you just want to dance, hearing the rhythms that just a piano trio comes up with. So he had this tremendous command of rhythm, tremendous technique, a tremendous command of harmony and melody. Of course, he was just a complete musician, and quite entertaining too. If you watch him in interviews and in live performances, he really knew how to put on a show.
Oscar Peterson is probably, I would say arguably Canada's most significant jazz musician, someone who emerged from Montreal to really take over the world stages, and not only revolutionized piano technique and the way that jazz piano was understood around the world, but also had a tremendous influence on jazz music across Canada and internationally. I mean, he's truly just an incredible legacy of creativity, artistry, excellence here in Canada, and someone for whom we should all be very proud.
One of the things that sets Oscar Peterson apart is from other musicians is how he was able to bridge different styles. This made him revolutionary at the time. He was able to blend elements from the jazz idiom and classical music together. He played a lot of counterpoint, and we hear this in the music of Bach. We hear this with excellent improvisers. He had the virtuosity between his 2 hands to play melodies with himself, with inside his voicings on the piano. It's an incredible instrument he was able to orchestrate, I guess, is what I'm really thinking of.
I would agree that Oscar Peterson is, on the scale of virtuosity and technique, really unmatched in the world of jazz piano. And interestingly, I think that he came to that technical mastery in a variety of ways, and part of that was through his classical training for sure. He studied with a number of different people in the Montreal area as a youngster. His sister was one of them, but most notably on the classical side, he studied with a gentleman named Paul Demarchi, who was a Hungarian, accomplished classical pianist in his own right, and also a fantastic pedagogue. Interestingly, Paul Demarchi was, as Oscar Peterson put it, a descendant, which is more of a musical descendant in many ways, to the great Franz Liszt, noted classical composer and pianist, who himself was known for absolutely staggering virtuosity and technique on the piano.
I was about 12 doors away from the Peterson family, but the first time that I heard him play and actually saw him was at the Union United Church, where every Thursday, I believe, we used to have these concerts given by the residents of the church. The first time that I remember seeing Oscar Peterson, I was about 4 or 5 years old, and I sneaked up to the front of the stage. I just knew that it was this piano player that belonged to the church that was going to play. And so myself and 2 other friends sneaked up. So we were right in front. And the thing that fascinated me about Oscar was the size of his hands. He was probably 15 or 16 years old by then. And I kept saying to myself, well, how is he going to be able to put these big hands into the piano keys and not make mistakes? From what I heard, there was no mistakes made.
Oscar taught and mentored many, many musicians in Canada over the years. The earliest example that I've been made aware of was the Advanced School of Contemporary Music that he ran in Toronto from 1960 to 1963 with his trio mates at the time. And he, by all accounts, was running this school essentially out of the basement of his home up in Willowdale in Toronto, and was mentoring musicians in a course that he and the trio designed and implemented all on their own, without any kind of federal or provincial funding to my knowledge, and just kind of went for it for the love of teaching.
I know by studying piano, you obviously would have started playing what we call classical music, didn't you?
That's true.
Is this an essential for a jazz pianist?
Quite definitely. It's an essential for any musician.
Is it?
And this is something that not only myself, in as far as handling my students, but all of us, these are theories and practices that we employ in the development of the students. We find that, to be truthful, the basic lacking is primarily from a classical or a diatonic standpoint.
Later in Oscar's life, the Banff School in Alberta, which has since become one of the foremost if training grounds for jazz musicians all across this country, and has existed and thrived for decades.
Probably his most important contribution from my perspective to advocacy and musical education is here at York University, where he became an early proponent for and involvement with what was then a young and emerging jazz program, the first in Canada here at York. And his presence had an incredible effect on our faculty, our staff, our students, and certainly when participating and serving as an adjunct faculty member in the program, it really elevated the whole experience for students, and in part because of what he gave directly in terms of attention, but also because of the symbol that he was. He was an aspirational figure. He was he gave students belief that there was a future for their own careers and creative ambitions. And that became, I think, even more significant and intensified when he was appointed as Chancellor of York University. And he served in that role from 1991 to 1993.
Oscar's influence can still be seen today in the recently named Oscar Peterson School of Music through the Royal Conservatory of Music here in Toronto, where they offer education to people from underserved communities who may be in some financial need. And it's a great initiative, and it's just wonderful to see Oscar's continuing influence, knowing how passionate he was as an educator, and to see that legacy continue right here in Toronto is really special.
His music has reached so many listeners around the world, and it brought me into jazz, and it kept me in jazz. I know that there's thousands of musicians around the world that were initially introduced to it because of Oscar Peterson, and who play it because of Oscar Peterson, and then hundreds of thousands of listeners who just love it because of music that Oscar did. He would take what was popular at the time too, right? There's an album I know that he did, Oscar Peterson Trio, the jazz portrait of Frank Sinatra, where he's taking all of Sinatra's hits and he's just doing them as instrumental jazz in a trio setting, and it's an amazing album. It's done impeccably. Or even earlier, he would do the songbook. So I think he adapted to what was popular for the time, but he also knew what made sense to him, and he didn't deviate too far from his sound, right? He always kind of kept his sound. Later in his career, he did more composing. At the end of the day, he always sounded like Oscar Peterson from pretty much from day one. You could tell, oh, that's Oscar Peterson at the piano.
I started to play at all the places that Oscar played as a youngster and in his teen years, and did the same thing, played for the dances at church and different locations, places around Montreal. People became familiar with my playing, so I kind of was there. Everyone was starting to say, well, Oscar has done it, so now it's your turn. I should be next in line, not realizing what they were saying. I don't think people really realize that you were talking about the world's greatest jazz pianist. The great thing is, as of 8 years ago, that hall in the church is called the Oliver Jones Room. And that I'm very, very proud of.
Unfortunately, I never had the opportunity to see Mr. Peterson play live. However, I played for 15 years with Oliver Jones. Oliver Jones grew up just a few doors down from Mr. Peterson, and that line to Oscar, Daisy, is direct, and he would have these incredible stories about being out front of Oscar's house and listening to Oscar practice and what that meant to him, and just the visualization of that is so incredible. And so it was amazing to hear these stories firsthand of how influential that Oscar was to a whole generation of musicians.